Hello, my name is Jeff Mann. I teach religion and ethics at Susquehanna University in Selinsgrove, Pennsylvania. And I'd like to share some of my thoughts and observations about the recent case of the killing of Ahmoud Arbery. This has been in the news a lot, it's on social media a lot lately, and I'd like to share some of my thoughts and perspectives and observations on all of this. Now, some of you, especially those of you who know me, may be thinking, why on earth do you want to do this? This is such a hot button issue. It's so divisive. It's so raw. It's so laden with racial tension. Why would you want to talk about that, have a discussion about that, and possibly create difficulty and tension? But I think that's exactly why we need to talk about it, because it is such a volatile topic, because people feel so strongly about this. I think that's why it's really important to have conversations, to have informed civil conversations, so that we can model for one another what a good conversation looks like. I don't pretend to know all the facts. I'm sure there are some things that I'm missing. There are some things that none of us know. And if I get anything wrong, I hope someone will correct me. And if someone disagrees with my perspective, I hope that they ask me, challenge me, question me, that we can have a civil discussion about a very difficult issue, because we need to get better at doing that as a nation. So I'll just mention, I have very limited tech knowledge, so this is all going to be one take. I know how to use the pause button, but if I misspeak, I can't go back and edit this. So bear with me as we go through this all in one long take. So for those of you who may not be as familiar with this as others, here's what happened. Down in Georgia, we know that there's a man named Ahmoud Arbery, a young man, and he was out running on the road, and there were two individuals, Mr. McMichael, Gregory McMichael, and his son, Travis, and they believed him to be the suspect in an armed robbery, and they proceeded to arm themselves and go after him to detain him before the police could arrive, presumably to have him arrested. And they pulled their pickup truck in front of him on the road and stopped, got out of the truck, confronted him, and in the confrontation that ensued, there was a tussle over the shotgun that Travis, the son, was holding, and Mr. Arbery, Ahmoud Arbery, was shot and killed. And that's basically the basic storyline as it plays out. And in talking about this, I think it's important that we differentiate what we know, what are the facts of the case as best we know them, and what are the conclusions that we may reach, or the opinions that we have, because it's important to differentiate those. I think we can have better conversations if we say, well, here's what we know and here's what I think. And I think that goes a long way. So why were they chasing him down? They claim that they believed him to be a suspect in a series of armed robberies. And he, I guess I don't even know if I mentioned this, if you didn't already know this, Mr. Arbery is black, the McMichaels are white. And so they believed he matched the description of someone, and that's why they were chasing him, because they wanted to stop him. Why the guns? Well, they were legally, they were within their legal rights to carry firearms in the state of Georgia. They were in abidance with the law there. And so I think they may have anticipated that the situation could turn difficult or violent and wanted to be able to defend themselves. I think that's why they took firearms. They had also had a pistol stolen from in front of their house recently. And so if they believed that this individual was the same thief, or alleged thief, right, then they might have thought he might be armed, and that might be why they armed themselves. My interpretation of some of this is that these two guys, while I believe their intention was to detain him as a suspect, I think they were also playing the sort of hero / badass role that a lot of guys like to play. We like to imagine ourselves in that hero badass role. And so we stopped the guy at gunpoint who we thought, we thought was this criminal, and we got him for the police. And I think that was some of the incentive in terms of why they went after him. Okay. Race, right? This is very much about race. So, was race a factor in all of this? I don't have any factual evidence that race was a factor in this. Right? There's nothing I can point to and say, well, you know, the McMichaels yelled ethnic slurs at him, or the McMichaels had a history or belonged to the KKK or the Aryan Brotherhood or something like that. I'm not aware of any factual evidence that would suggest that race played a role. That being said, I, like a lot of other people, suspect that racial bias, animus, maybe racism, that this may well have played into this whole scenario. And so when looking at it as a whole, I can't point to specific facts, but the whole situation suggests that to me. And I suggest it to an awful lot of other people as well. That if this had been a white man jogging, would they have gone after him? Would they have armed themselves? Would this whole thing have played out? And so I think that, yeah, the race issue is where a lot of people are talking about it. And it's easy to reach that conclusion. And my personal opinion, yeah, I have a hard time believing that race was not involved. But as I said, I don't have any facts to support that claim. Related to that, how the case was treated. Why were things moving so slowly? Why weren't the McMichaels have now been arrested? Why weren't they arrested sooner? And some of this involves some different difficulties that were involved with the case. Mr. McMichaels, the father, Gregory, was a retired police officer. He had been a police officer, and so he had a connection with local law enforcement. And so the first district attorney recused himself from the case because of his connection with Mr. McMichaels. The second DA recused himself as well. He had a more indirect connection, but there was still a connection. And Mr. Arbery's mother had wanted him to recuse himself. One of the things I don't know is that the second DA believed that charges should not be filed. And he wrote as much. What I don't know is if he had made that case and then Arbery's mother pressed him to recuse himself, or if he had been pressed to recuse himself, and then when he submitted the letter recusing himself, he said, by the way, this is what I think. I don't know about that. And then finally, a third DA is going to take it before a grand jury, and the McMichaels have been arrested. But why did it move so slow? I think there's two things that we can talk about. One is COVID, right? The quarantining. Courts aren't open. Everything is moving much slower. And so we have to understand that things do move more slowly than we think, right? If we watch too many Law and Order episodes, we think these things happen really quickly. Things do take time, and with COVID, that would have slowed things down as well. The fact that Mr. McMichaels was a former cop, did that play a role in some of the early confusion and miscommunication and perhaps falsehoods that were stated? Possibly. I have a great deal of respect for police officers, but police officers are human beings, and some are better than others. And was there some preferential treatment shown toward the McMichaels? Possibly. I don't know. I have no factual evidence of that. Was there a general racial discrimination that was going on in law enforcement in that community? Possibly. I don't have any evidence. If you like to always assume where there's the possibility of racism, there must be racism, well, then you'll reach your own conclusion. I don't know. I think that's a reasonable suggestion to make, but we would need facts before we make accusations. Okay, so the next thing has to do with a lot of the rhetoric that people are using with this. Was this a lynching? People have used the word lynching to describe this. It's been said that Arbery was hunted down. Was it a lynching? No, this was not a lynching. And I don't mean that literally. I understand people are saying it figuratively, that this is a modern day lynching. But this is why I don't believe that that is an appropriate term to use to describe this, even metaphorically. When it comes to lynchings, when it comes to hunting things, or animals or people, right? Your intention in going out is to kill that person. You're going after a person in order to kill that person. And from the evidence that I have and from what I've seen, I honestly do not believe that the McMichaels went after Mr. Arbery intending to kill him. I think they armed themselves in order to make sure that they could detain him and possibly defend themselves if they believe that he may have been armed. Um, but in either case, I don't believe that they were intending to kill him. If you watch the video, and there are different news sites where you can see the video, and watch it slowly without the narrative, and what you will see is that when they try to detain him, he makes a move toward the son, toward Travis, grabbing at his shotgun. And as he makes a move towards him, running at him to grab his shotgun, that's when the shots are fired, and that's when he gets killed. So I honestly do not believe that the McMichaels intended to go and kill him, but rather they ended up killing him, certainly. And we'll get to the legal aspects of this in a moment. But I don't think talking about lynching or hunting him down is appropriate. I think Mr. McMichael, the son with the shotgun, when he fired, I think that he believed that his life was in danger. And so that's why he fired that shot. That being said, Mr. McMichael was the bad guy in the situation. His life may actually have been in danger, right? But he was the bad guy in the situation, and here's why. And this is where we get into the law a little bit, and why I disagree with the second district attorney who said that this was an act of self-defense on the part of the McMichaels. So in the state of Georgia, citizens can make citizens arrests. Let me get the right slide here. And so citizens arrests can take place. And so we see here, this first paragraph, a private person may arrest an offender if the offense is committed in his presence or within his immediate knowledge. And I think that phrase right there is the key phrase. If the offense is a felony and the offender is escaping or attempting to escape, a private person may arrest him upon reasonable and probable grounds of suspicion. So that one paragraph, I think, says a lot. So can one make a citizen's arrest? Yeah, in different states, right? In Pennsylvania, you can. What I'm told, they don't call it a citizen's arrest, but you can detain someone in this sort of situation. But the offense has to be committed in your presence or within your immediate knowledge. And so if you see someone gun someone down or assault someone, or if you have immediate knowledge of that being the case, then you are allowed to do that. Then you are allowed to detain someone, and if you are legally permitted to use a firearm, presumably you would be allowed to do that in this situation. However, the McMichaels in this case do not meet that standard. Any alleged offense by Mr. Arbery, whether he did or did not, is actually irrelevant, right? Because whatever might have happened, there was no crime committed in the presence or with the immediate knowledge of the McMichaels. And so they did not have the right to detain him, especially to detain him at the end of a gun. And so really what's happening is what the McMichaels did in stopping someone who was out running on the road in a perfectly legal fashion with no immediate knowledge of him committing a crime, is they committed some sort of illegal detention, or this may fall under the category of kidnapping, right? So from a legal standpoint, what they did in stopping him in that way was a very serious crime. Illegally detaining someone, something that falls under the category of kidnapping, is very serious. In that situation, Mr. Arbery has the right to defend himself. And so if someone tries to kidnap you, especially if you believe that your life may be in danger because people have firearms, you have the right to defend yourself. And so in that situation, when Mr. Arbery grabs at the shotgun that Travis McMichael is holding, it seems perfectly reasonable to conclude that he was seeking to defend his life. And he is permitted to do that. However, when he did that, and there's the tussle over the gun, and the gun goes off and he gets shot and killed, this is what happens. And so I think to understand the dynamics. So what does this become then? What kind of case does this become? There's a DA who's going to have to make a call on that. Whether this does constitute illegal detention, kidnapping. The death of Mr. Arbery then is probably going to be either manslaughter or murder too, right? Second-degree murder. This wasn't premeditated, and someone's going to have to make that call. And I will say this: I don't know. This is beyond my expertise, certainly. But what the DA who makes that call and whether charges are going to be sought as murder or manslaughter, that person is doing this under a microscope, and he or she is going to be trying to do it as fairly and as objectively as possible. And whatever decision is made, you know that there's going to be a lot of people who say that that decision was unjust. So I feel for that person. But I'm sure that the person who's going to make those decisions on specifically what charges are filed, and the person's prosecuted under, is going to be doing that with the best effort to be as absolutely fair and impartial objective as possible. But that's what we have here. So when talking about the case as the murder of Arbery, I think that that language is appropriate, as long as one understands that it's conceivable that the case may not play out that way, and he may, the McMichaels may be charged instead with manslaughter, in addition to other charges as well. Okay. So that's sort of some of the facts of the case, some of my opinions about the case. But the big thing I think is what do we take from this, right? What do we learn from this whole situation? And I think there's two things, right? There are two things I think that we can learn, that we should learn from all this. One of them has to do with firearms, and the second one has to do with rhetoric. And the point I want to make about firearms is not what you're probably expecting. Whatever you might be expecting, I'm not going to say actually anything about gun control, but rather this. When the McMichaels decide that they want to detain someone that they believe is a criminal, they take the firearms that they possess, legally possess, and use them in this case. But one of the things for people who do carry firearms or consider carrying firearms is, as soon as you put a pistol on your waist, or you grab a shotgun and put that in the window of your truck, you have just raised the stakes of any encounter tremendously. So when I go through my daily life, right, I know that I might run into a situation of some violence, right? I live in a pretty safe place, but things can happen, right? Someone starts messing with you, you get in a car accident and someone gets mad, or someone says you're looking at my girlfriend or whatever, right? And there are situations of violence that can play out. And for the most part, I feel pretty comfortable in these situations because I'm pretty good at talking and I'm pretty fast, and I have the basic skills to keep myself safe. And so I don't worry too much about those situations. But for those people who carry firearms, you know very well that as soon as you put a pistol on your waist, you go out and whether it's concealed or it's not concealed, any altercation has the potential of ramping up to an extreme level of force very, very quickly. Because what could just be a tussle and a pushing match, and then suddenly some pistol falls on the floor, or you see that the other person is carrying a pistol, can make the violence escalate tremendously quickly. And I think this is something that people thinking about carrying firearms have to remember and have to bear in mind, that the stakes become so much higher as soon as you arm yourself. And it could be, you know, a low-level social violence situation, some monkey dance of some guys at a bar, and they're just trying to show off who's more of an alpha male. And yes, there are situations of asocial violence, of extreme potential violence, where having a firearm makes an awful lot of sense. But every encounter then has the potential for being a very high level of force. And so if a person is going to arm him or herself, they have to know the law, and they have to know that they have to have the training to make sure that they act in a very responsible manner. And they have to have the self-control not to go around looking to be a tough guy, right? If the McMichaels knew the law better, they would have known, you can't do this. You cannot make a citizen's arrest. And therefore they wouldn't have gone after the guy, or wouldn't have gone after him with firearms. If the McMichaels had gone after him in a legal way or an illegal way, without firearms, chances are that things might have still turned ugly, but they probably wouldn't have turned deadly. And so if a person is going to carry a firearm, you have to know that the stakes have just gone up through the roof. I talk about this in the last book that I wrote. I wrote a book called May I Kill? The Ethics of Violence, available on Amazon. And in this, I make this point: you have a moral responsibility, if you're going to carry a firearm, to know the law and to have really solid training behind you, because you have decided to put yourself in situations that can easily involve life and death. And so I think that's one thing we need to learn from the Arbery killing, right, from this tragedy. And with that in mind, I'm not going to talk about gun control. This isn't the time or place, because that's not a helpful discussion to have around this sort of issue. But for those people who are thinking about arming themselves, you have to bear that in mind. The second point that I want to make, the second thing I think I'd say we should learn, but we should already have known this, is that the extreme rhetoric that we use with discussions of issues like this is not helping. It always makes the situation worse. And so as one example of this, I don't know if people have personal opinions about those involved in this. There's a meme that I have here at the top, and depending on how big the print is, I'll read this. It's a picture of Ahmoud Arbery. It says, "I was murdered by an armed father and son who hunted me down and shot me as I jogged in a Georgia neighborhood. Neither of my killers have been charged. My name is Ahmoud Arbery." And so I think that's a little bit over the line to say again that they hunted me down. That communicates something that isn't really, accurate. I don't think this is completely over the top, but I do think it is less than accurate and not particularly helpful. I have seen people posting this after the McMichaels have been charged, and so I think that's also unhelpful because too many people get their news from internet memes. Below that, I don't think you can read that, is a tweet from LeBron James. And whatever you think of LeBron James or basketball or anything, that's not really the point here. LeBron James wrote, "We are literally hunted every day, every time. We step foot outside the comfort of our homes. Can't even go for a damn jog, man. Like, what the fuck, man? Are you kidding me? No, I can't read all this. No, man, blah, blah. Are you kidding me? I'm sorry, Ahmad, rest in peace, and my prayers and blessings." And blah, 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 blah. I don't have the full tweet. I guess it continues on the next one. But this response of LeBron James, "We're literally hunted every day, every time. We step foot outside to comfort our homes. Can't even go for a damn jog." This is such over-the-top rhetoric, right? And I think there's a number of problems with this. And I'm not the only one. Jason Whitlock, who some people may know, is a sports commentator. He tweeted in response, "This isn't helpful. It's Twitter trolling. It's using this man's tragedy to build a brand as more outspoken than Michael Jordan. There are all kinds of ways to draw attention to this tragedy. Suggesting that we are hunted every day, every time is just shit stirring." I think there's a temptation that we have to use this over-the-top rhetoric, right? To use this extreme rhetoric when discussing cases like this. And we know that people do this in the media, right? Because it's about clickbait. And so they put something, really bold and outrageous out there because they want you to click on their site. And that's how they get business. And so we understand that, but we also understand that that's what they're doing, right? And when we get in there to whatever the story is, I'm like, oh, okay, that wasn't the headline. We know that this goes on. But when you have other people communicating this, talking about lynchings, talking about how we're literally hunted every day, every time, this sort of over-the-top rhetoric isn't just some hyperbole to make a point. It divides people. And the problem that we have is we're constantly exacerbating and increasing the polarization that we have in the United States over race relations and race narratives. So we've got some extreme groups in the United States, but for the most part, I think we have a lot of Americans that fall into two camps. That when we are talking about the race relations, and specifically the situations of Black Americans, right? You've got to remember, race relations is about a lot more than Black folks and white folks. But for right now, you have the people in the United States who say the challenges and the abuse and the discrimination and the racism that Black Americans face is really significant. It's more significant than you think. And then you have another group of people, and this other group of people says, no, it's not. The way that this is being depicted in the media, the situation of Blacks in America and the mistreatment by whites is being overstated. It's not as bad as you think. And of course, there's people in the middle, right? But we do have these two camps. And this is a conversation worth having. And I'm always trying to get a better sense of what the truth is. I mean, where I fall somewhere in the middle, right? I recognize I don't have all the facts and I'm trying to get a better understanding of this. But what happens when you use this extreme rhetoric is it just polarizes people. It pushes these two poles apart. And you get people who are like, yeah, it's really bad. And they're hunting us down and and it's lynchings are going on and we can't, we can't do a thing and this is awful and we need, extreme measures if we're going to make any progress. And you get other people over here who then start going and saying, there's not even an issue. You guys are just lying and exaggerating about all of this. Yeah, there are challenges and yeah, there's some racism. once in a while, but you guys have just totally overstated everything, and they don't talk to each other. This is why me having this conversation is controversial. And so when you use extreme rhetoric, and both sides can use it in all sorts of different issues, it polarizes us as a nation even more. There's enough things polarizing us that we need to do this. Because what happens is when LeBron James or someone else says, we're being hunted down, lynchings are still happening, is there are some people who this confirms their suspicions, right? Whether they're white or black or Asian or whatever it might be, it confirms their suspicions that there are huge racial problems. And they take this hyperbole seriously. They don't recognize it as hyperbole. And they become more paranoid at times and more distrustful. And then you get the folks over here who, on the other side, who say, look, you guys are always lying. This isn't what happened. Yeah, this was a tragedy. And yes, this was bad. And yes, it may have had some racial overtones or impetus, but you have made you're lying about it. That isn't what happened. We can't believe you. And so the next time you come and you say, oh, there's a big problem with racism, we're not going to believe you. And so they end up polarizing themselves even more. So we have to be careful, right? We have to be careful that we're not buying into the rhetoric and that we're not encouraging the rhetoric. And if you're going to post something about this, make sure you learn the facts first. You don't have to know everything. I don't know everything about this case. But make sure you've read a couple stories and not just from your echo chamber. You know, you're over here reading your echo chamber stuff and you're over here doing the same thing, and then nothing good happens. And so you need to do this. And I have a subscription to the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times. I'm not saying I'm the model and I'm always super well informed, but that's the sort of approach you have to take to understanding what's going on in the world, to follow conservative and liberal media sites. That way you're more likely to hear multiple perspectives, hear facts that the other side may not be mentioning. So, okay. I think I got through every point that I wanted to make. I know this is a very controversial issue. And so if I missed anything, I think factually wrong, please tell me right away. And I know facts are going to come out after this that I'm not aware of on this date. If you disagree with me on something, please go ahead and please show me the same basic respect that I would show you if we were to talk about this and disagree with this in person. But I hope you found this at least thought-provoking, engaging, and if it helped you think more clearly or critically about what your own position is on it, fantastic. And if you think this is a helpful conversation, then share it with someone else and see what they say. And so to all those who are trying to facilitate good civil discussion, thanks. I'm trying to do the same. And whatever ends up happening with this case, I think that one thing that we do need to remember in all this when we have these conversations about this, I just want to put this up here, is whatever we might think about race relations in America, whatever we may suspect about what happened down there, a young man died, and he died tragically. And this is tearing a lot of people apart, and his family, of course, especially. And so whenever we talk about these issues, we have to keep a human face on it. And I think that that's important that we always bear that in mind when we're having these discussions. So with that, I bid you all a good day and look forward to any feedback that you'd like to share with me. And that's it.